chairing the meeting tonight. Just like to draw your attention to a couple of issues, please. One is filming. The public, we're happy that the public, if they so wish, take films of the proceedings, and also make a note that the council is also filming the proceedings. And if you don't want to be on the webcam, you really need to sit in the public gallery. We aren't expecting any fire drills, so if the alarm goes, it is a proper fire, and if you could possibly meet at Rexdale Road after you've got out of the building, of course. And can I remember everybody that this is a council meeting that is in public. It's not a public meeting. What that means is that people, only councillors can actually contribute, and people that have been designated speakers can contribute. Unfortunately, other people can't contribute to the meeting. And if possible, could people turn off the mobile phones? And if we can now start the agenda properly, plus if we've got any apologies.
Councillor Maddock and Councillor Ibrahim, Chair. Councillor Cosgrove is here as substitute.
Thank you. Next item of urgent business. I don't think we've got any urgent business.
Excuse me, I'm having trouble hearing at the back. Is it possible to hear, please?
I'm just asking if anybody's. We have no urgent business. The next item is declarations of interest. Councillor Cosgrove.
It's the item about Mayfield School.
Thank you. Any further declarations? No. Public question time. Have we received any? There's no public questions. The minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated, they're on the pink paper. I'll move them as a record. Green. Thank you. To accommodate the people that are here and the numbers of people that are here, if we could change the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is going to be the Hollywood Avenue application at 285 Hollywood Avenue, and that's the change into HMO. And if I could ask the officers to outline the application.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The application has been brought to the committee due to the number of objections that have been received. So the application is located on the corner of Hollywood Avenue and Broadway. As you can see here, it's an extended property, and it has benefits from both front and rear gardens. And here are some images of the property showing its extensions this side. Firstly the garage to the side, and the single sort of rear extension. And obviously you can see the relationship between the adjoining neighbour, given that it's semi-detached. This is the relationship here with the adjoining property at the front, which is 574 Broadway. Some more photos looking up and down Hollywood Avenue, and the parking arrangements on the front, which is for two cars. This is looking the opposite way down Hollywood Avenue and to the junction with Broadway, and this is up through the rear garden. Some more images showing the adjoining detached neighbour, and here is the proposed plan. The two-storey side extension and first floor rear extension you can see here has actually been given permission through a previous application, which was for householder consent. So the additions in principle have already been established under that manner. The scheme is for the creation of a 7-bed HMO. Just draw the committee's attention to the fact that a 6-bed HMO could be implemented on the site if they'd completed the extensions first under permitted development. Permitted development allows a property to be converted up to a 6-bed HMO. So the difference we're considering is the additional bedroom, and it's noted that a previous application was refused, and at appeal we lost, given that the inspector considered the application on its own merits and supported supported the mix of housing stock. And obviously it's noted that there isn't a significant number of HMOs in this area, and as such, if you take the guidance from the planning inspector's decision there at Pole Lane, then obviously that logic could be applied to this application as well. And the officer's quite clearly gone through that in the report. There's no highway implications that we raise concerns with, given that 2 car parking spaces are being provided and it's close to both the bus and train stops. In addition, the amenity impact in terms of outlook and positioning of windows is obviously considered on the previous application for the extensions, and that's not an issue either in terms of the officer recommendation. It is recommended for approval.
Has anybody got any questions of the officer? You have three minutes to speak. 30 seconds before the 3 minutes are up, you'll be given a word.
Thank you.
Yes, sit down. Well, sit down.
I'm going to thank in advance to Councillor Chris Goodwin, who'll be making comments and arguments in terms of objecting to this HMO. I'm here tonight representing the residents and community where the HMO is being proposed, and quite evidently we are strongly opposed to the licence being granted. There is clear evidence from the planning regulations to reject this application. Objections and points will be raised tonight to actually go through these. Points that we're talking about is the area and location, traffic and parking, number of rubbish bin requirements and waste concerns, noise and serious concerns to the immediate neighbours, and drains and the extra pressure placed on the shared drainage system. That's a name but a few to support this application. I do ask the question why the applicant did not engage with the residents in advance of submitting his application. My question is, has he got something to hide? The plans submitted in July were for residential extension, not an HMO. And in terms of the approval granted, this is just for a residential extension. He then submitted further plans in December 19 for an HMO, then changed his plans in January 20. Why? Because he was in breach of the planning regulations regarding room size. It is quite evident that the applicant was applying in stages to try and secure his desired outcome, namely a HMO. In terms of notifications, you could argue that the council provided the minimum legal notification necessary. That said, there was certainly confusion regarding the dates of the notifications. In terms of the deadline dates for comment, 3 separate dates were stated by the council, namely the 6th of Jan, 10th of Jan and 11th of Jan respectively. Taking all of this into account and the apparent lack of communication, the number of objections received by the council for this does evidence the strength of community feeling. Tensions and concerns are running high because of this, and to grant this would increase these tensions. To allow this HMO in this family residential area would set a very strong precedent, which would then be used and referenced for future applications. In terms of the planning officer's recommendation report on this, it referenced Pole Lane Failsworth. Pole Lane only had 11 objections and is quite clearly in a different location area to where this HMO is being sought. This application had 130 plus objections at deadline date and is now in excess of 150 objections. In terms of reference to Pole Lane, it seemed to indicate that every street needs a HMO, and a HMO is needed to make a community diverse and inclusive. We are already very much a diverse and inclusive community without this. For valid and justifiable reasons given here tonight, and within the objections already sent to the council, this application should and must be rejected. And I ask and urge you as a committee to do what is right and appropriate for the residents of South Chadderton in coming to the decision of rejecting this. And that, for me, is complete, and I thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Derwin. If you could stay there to see if anybody's got any members have got any questions. Councillor Davis.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah.
You live nearby to this development.
I live right across the road, yes.
Right, so you were aware there was an extension being built and there was no mention of it becoming an HMO when that was put in, to your knowledge?
Correct. I was not aware. I was not communicated about the extension. There was no letter sent to my property at all. It may have been stuck on a lamp post outside, but in terms of the extension, I wasn't notified. And in terms of the HMO, there was only 5 communications out notifying the people of this application. And those 150 objections was through us going up and down the road, making people aware of what could happen.
So you didn't even know there was an extension being built then?
No. No.
Okay. Okay.
Is there any further questions? Councillor, you?
There we go. So I was just, thank you for the thing. I was just going to ask about the tensions that you mentioned, and I was just wondering if you could expand on that, because I wasn't quite sure what you were meaning.
The thing is, we can't prejudge, and I'm not against HMOs in principle. As far as I'm concerned, it's not appropriate for the area and the location. Tensions, we don't know the type of resident that's going to be housing there, and we can't comment. We've got to wait and see. Could be a risk, but we don't know. In terms of the actual HMO, there's been no details about the management of it, so that in itself causes concern, because as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be very tightly managed to make sure it's properly controlled and it doesn't cause problems to the area. Okay.
Councillor Gloucester?
Did you say that you already have a number of HMOs in the area?
Not on Hollywood Avenue. There's one in Pole Lane, because the one that's been referenced in the planning officer's report refers to Pole Lane. Pole Lane's Failsworth. This is South Chadderton.
Yeah. So are there any in that area?
Not specific that I'm aware of.
Is no further questions? Thanks very much
Thank
indeed. Could I ask Mr. Alex, you'll have to excuse me pronunciation, Migiers, who's the applicant? Thank you. At the same time, constraints apply as well. So if you can start in your own time.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this committee. I would like to start by recognizing that we understand the concerns raised by our neighbors. We do know that when a lot of people read the letters HMO, the immediate image that comes to their minds are about the worst possible tenants, drug addicts, thieves, ex-convicts, or lousy students partying all weekend. In our case, this image cannot be further away from the truth. Unfortunately, we had not had the time to introduce ourselves to our neighbors and explain our intentions. For this, we can only apologize. I think it is important to highlight our experience as tenants with the rental sector in England. We arrived to this great country many years ago, and as a couple of young professionals, I have to say that our experience was appalling. We really struggled for years to find decent accommodation at reasonable prices. Obviously, we had no possibilities of buying a house, so we had no other option but to suffer until we were lucky enough to get on the property ladder. With effort and sacrifice, we managed to convert this traumatic experience in a business opportunity. We have created a product that caters for the needs of high-end professionals. My wife is an interior designer, and we refurbish and decorate our homes to the highest possible standards. We manage ourselves, 2 other homes, and we can proudly say that we have as tenants professionals such as nurses, doctors, lawyers, bus drivers, and teachers. In general, people that will contribute and will be highly appreciated in any community. We already have planning application granted for the construction of a side and back extension, and we can legally rent up to 6 bedrooms without a HMO license. In reality, this application relates to just one extra bedroom that will be built in the property. I would like to finish by saying that we live here. This is our home. This is our community, and we will not be doing anything that could, under any circumstances, affect the normal, amicable environment in the neighborhood. On the contrary, we firmly believe that what we are proposing is in benefit to the street, to the neighborhood, and for the whole community of Oldham. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Hudson?
Looks a very big extension to me. Do you think that this is the right property? With such a lot of big houses in the Metropolitan Borough available, I wonder if we need to have such a large extension. What is your view on that?
Just to remind you, Councillor Hudson, the extension's already been granted.
What?
The extension's already been granted. You know, through a previous application.
Looks a large one.
Have you got any comments?
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor. I completely understand the concern. We had a very experienced architect on board giving us advice about this application. He took measurements of the property, and he also looked carefully to what other neighbors have done as well in the same street. And I can guarantee you that we are not doing anything outside the council's policy, as actually it has been confirmed, because as the chair said, this extension has been already granted. The planning permission has been already granted.
Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. When you applied for planning for the extension, did you tell them it was going to become an HMO, or did you not know at that stage?
Well, I will explain exactly the chain of events that happened. What happened with this property is that we are living there, actually. This is our home. So initially, my architect made a mistake and sent the application without mentioning that it was going to be a HMO. The council came back to us and they raised concerns about the size of the bedrooms, which we addressed appropriately, and then we commented to them verbally that our plan was going to be a HMO, and the feedback that we received was that it was going to be easier to get first the planning application approved for the extension that we wanted, and then at a later stage we can at any time apply for the HMO license, because obviously we had the extension already there. So the extension has been already approved. So that's what we did. That's how we proceeded.
Sorry, Councillor Davis, then Councillor G.
So just to come back then, when you put that application in, you didn't tell them it was going to be a HMO when you put the application in for the extension?
When we put the application for the initial application for the extension, we didn't say that it was going to be a HMO, no. But I would like to highlight that it was a mistake. It wasn't on purpose.
Councillor Jakes?
Do you already have tenants ready to move into this property? And if so, you know, where have you sourced them from? Where are you advertising for them?
No, we have not yet started the extension works, so we do not have any tenants yet, no.
Councillor Harkness?
Yes, so in our report it says we've got a range of sizes of bedrooms ranging from 10.1 square metres to 12.7 square metres. So how many are at the 10.1 end, how many are at the 12.7 end, and how many are sort of in between?
Sorry, Councillor, I do not have the plans here with me, I'm afraid. I don't know if
okay,
your colleague from the planning committee will be able to
one,
address that question.
Okay. Do you plan on living there once all the rooms are occupied?
Yes, what we normally do is we live there for a while, until we manage to basically recover our the investment that we make, because obviously it's a substantial investment. So yes, the answer is that in 2 previous projects that we have done similarly to this, we live in the property, we share it with our own tenants for a while, for probably 2 or 3 years, and then we move on.
Councillor Hume.
Sorry. So in terms of, I know you said that you were looking for professional tenants. I was just wondering, obviously they'll come with cars. What is in terms of, there's the 2 parking spaces, what's the parking situation like on the road? And where will they, I know that it's near transport things, but people will bring their cars. I'm just wondering what other areas there are for people to park nearby.
Yes, thank you for your question. In our experience, as I said, we manage another 2 properties. When a property such as this one, it has a great location, the vast majority of the tenants, they don't have cars. On the contrary, they rely on public transport. This property is less than 2 minutes walk from the train station, from Moston train station, and quite close to local amenities, to supermarkets, etc., etc. So I can guarantee you that not all the tenants will have cars. And on top of that, obviously we live there, so we know well the dimensions of the parking area. The officer from the planning said that there was a space for 2 cars. I'm afraid that I will need to disagree with that. There are space for easily 4 cars to be parked there in that area. We have measured that up, and there is enough space for 4 cars to be parked there.
Have we got any further questions? If not, thank you very much indeed. If I could ask Councillor Goodwin to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to Councillor Gloucester's earlier question, there are several other HMOs within the Chatham South Ward, though not necessarily on Hollandwood Avenue, but there are several HMOs nearby. I'm objecting to this proposal HMO in my ward on the following grounds: loss of amenity, traffic issues, noise and nuisance. I will go through these explaining why I believe the committee should refuse this application on those grounds. Loss of amenity and noise nuisance. The report states the level of activity and noise generated would be no more than a regular residential dwelling. I'm sorry, but to consider a semi-detached property housing up to 8 residents, if regulations are adhered to, and taking into account daytime and possible overnight visitors, would generate the same noise and activity as a regular house is absurd. The adjoining property, number 287, will have 4 living spaces attached to their shared wall. That's 4 rooms which each one will house a resident, accommodating any visitors they may have, a television, games console, speaker, all things you would expect within a bedsit type bedroom. I can't think of any other regular dwelling that's laid out in such a manner. The report goes on to state there's been a large number of representations have been received due to fear of noise, crime and antisocial behaviour. Well, I can assure the committee they have sound reason for this. And the reason for this is, in my experience as a ward councillor, I can state that HMOs, where there is little or no management control of the buildings or its residents, frequently cause misery for neighbours due to noise, fly tipping, amassing of waste, antisocial behaviour and occasionally crime. The revised plans show only 4 wheelie bins. This is the correct number for a regular household, but this is not a regular household, and this will generate an excessive amount of waste. I appreciate this property may be entitled to an additional grey bin, but having 8 residents along with visitors, this may not be enough and may result in a large amount of waste being stored at the rear of the property, adjacent to a young family's garden where their children play. I've been informed that 287, 285 Hollandwood Avenue and 574 Broadway also share a waste drain, which has been a history of blockages. Housing 8 residents and accommodating their visitors will only demand on this drain exponentially. There's no mention of any consultation on the drainage matter in this report, so therefore I must take it that it's not been taken into account. Traffic issues. The report states that car ownership amongst occupiers of HMOs is low. However, if only half of the occupiers have vehicles, that would amount to 4. The driveway of the property only accommodates 2, as the report states. This would lead to vehicle pavement parking in an already affected area by an area already affected by pavement parking. Again, it would not be unreasonable to assume that residents will receive visitors. Some of these are likely to be car owners, adding to the problem. I'd also like to point out that immediately outside the property is a bus stop. Traffic driving on or parking on the pavement will be an additional hazard to bus users waiting for or alighting from buses. Also, the owner of 574 Broadway, next door to this property, has a disabled daughter who receives regular visitors from health professionals. An increase in pavement parking would result in the resident and his daughter and the health visitors being unable to access his property. The junction near which this property is situated is a bit of an accident black spot, with 11 casualty accidents between 2014 and 2018, one of which was serious. Having additional vehicles accessing and egressing Hollandwood Avenue at this point, very close to the junction, would increase the risk of further accidents. This is a 40-mile-an-hour road. The report also refers to a rejection by this committee to the application of an HMO at Pole Lane, subsequently allowed an appeal by Planning Inspectorate. I'm sorry, but including such information is an attempt to persuade the committee to approve this application. For this report to be unbiased, a reference should have been made to the number of appeals to the Planning Inspectorate that have been rejected. I haven't got that data, but I believe planning officers compiling such a report should do so. I'd also like to point to the committee regarding the application for the bedroom from a 3-bedroom property into a 4-bedroom property, the aforementioned extension. This was never mentioned to be a HMO. It was simply for the property to be extended from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. Had the full and open intentions of the applicant been made at the time, I'm confident there would have been many more objections to that application as there is to this one. In considering this application, I'd also like to make the committee aware that complaints regarding the applicant's HMO in Aberdeen were made in 2018. The complaints related to poor waste management, smell, antisocial behaviour and noise. I'm sure councillors considered that in Aberdeen and they would have made their own decision. Also, it would appear the applicant is already making changes to his property, as I received a complaint regarding noise going on until shortly before midnight last night. Maybe not last night, maybe a couple of nights ago actually. We talk a lot about aspirational housing being in the need in the borough, yet here we have a property being taken off the market by someone outside the borough purely for commercial reasons. And I said outside the borough because I thought the applicant lived in Stockport. Obviously he lives at the property, so I apologise for that ignorance. However, thank you. However, this is ignoring the needs of many families we represent who are also looking to move into such a property, as well as changing the character of the area. For these reasons, I would like the committee to reject this application.
Has any members got any questions to Councillor Godwin? Councillor Hume?
I suppose I was going to ask, what is the sort of local need for housing in Chadderton South? Is there a lot of, do you speak to a lot of people who see that they need sort of cheaper rented housing, or is there much more need for family housing? What's the kind of housing need?
I'm not sure about what the housing need is in Chadderton, apart from the fact that just down the road at the Lancaster Gardens development, where they're building 3- and 4-bedroom houses, they are selling at a rate of knots. So I think there is a serious need for large family houses within the area.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Pippian.
You said earlier that there's some other HMOs in South Chadderton. Are the problems related to them HMOs, such as parking, antisocial behaviour, that you know of? Or?
Yes, myself and ward colleagues have had plenty of casework relating to some HMOs within the ward. Not all HMOs, but some HMOs that are not managed and tenants are just put in there and not managed, basically. And yeah, they make neighbours' lives a misery.
Any further questions? Thanks very much, Councillor Godwin. The matter's open for debate. Councillor Brownridge.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have to accept that the issue before us is the fact this could operate as an HMO for 6 bedrooms or for 6 residents without us having any say in it at all. And we have to accept that whether we like it or not, that is what the planning system allows. So what we're discussing is whether the introduction of 1 additional bedroom is significant enough. I think the relevance of the appeal decision that's mentioned is that was those issues that Councillor Goodwin and the objectors have raised, which I entirely understand, were very much the reasons why the application at Failsworth was refused. It was about character of the neighbourhood, it was possible noise and disturbance, loss of family housing, and the inspector said quite clearly there was no justification for allowing that decision to refuse permission to stand, because there weren't enough examples to cause that significant change. Now, we have to take that decision into account whether we like it or not, because that is a decision that a planning inspector's come to, so it's a material consideration. So I think we have to accept that what we're discussing here is whether that 1 additional bedroom will create such a nuisance that we can justify a refusal of planning permission, because we have to remember also that if we refuse permission, the applicant has the right to appeal, so that decision will not be the final decision, and we have to take that into account. It would seem to me that, painful though it is, 1 additional bedroom is not of itself going to be such a material worsening of the situation that we could justify refusal. But obviously that's just my view.
Agnes, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what Councillor Brownman just said there to an extent, but so I'm just looking at a report on page 59. It's related to what I mentioned earlier, and the advisory minimum is 10 square metres. Now, it says in the report that there's a range of bedroom sizes from a minimum of 10.1 square metres, which is more or less the minimum, and a maximum of 12.7 square metres. So I suppose my question is, how many of each category have we got on the plan? Because if they were all at 10.1, then I think that would be fair enough saying, actually, that's not good enough for Oldham in terms of sizing.
Just hang on a second.
In reply, I checked the plan, and there are 2 at 10.1. There is 1 at 10.6, 1 at 10.5, 1 at 11.5, 1 at 11.8, and 1 at 12.7.
Okay. Is there any further questions? Or observations, rather?
I should have said that, obviously, in relation to those bedroom sizes, the report relates to, obviously, the HMO standards, and in relation to general housing standards, you're looking at a bedroom size for a single person of 7.5 as the minimum, and a 2-bedroom one is 11.5, just so everyone's aware of the requirements that we would make on housing developments.
Councillor Davis.
Well, you just confirmed what I was going to ask then. He must have known. He must have read my mind. But the other thing I was going to say is, if the officers could comment, large family homes, which once this has had its extension, it's going to be a large 4-bed home, family home. Have we got enough of those large 4-bed family homes in Oldham?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Again, I don't have the statistics in front of me to set out what the breakdown is of demand in that particular area. What's absolutely clear for ourselves is that there is a requirement for a mix of house types to be made available in different locations across the borough to meet the demands both of large family units but also of single people, of other people in between that range. I think some of the comments that have been made is that most of the properties in this wider area are family houses, and that there is a new estate which is also actually considered a site close to that on this agenda, which is new family housing. But we do have to recognise that there is increased demand for much smaller accommodation, and particularly accommodation which is in a sustainable and accessible location. So in that regard, whilst, as I say, I don't have the stats, there almost certainly is a demand for that size of housing, but there is also a demand for much smaller properties as well.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, Chair, that's fine, but we're not quite sure whether we've got enough 4-bed and large properties for large families. But if we haven't, then okay, there's an argument about wanting different types of properties, but you're solving one problem and creating another one.
I think the answer is there's a deficit of around 8,000 homes that we need in Oldham at least, of all different sizes and tenures. So I think that's the ballpark we have. Councillor Hudson.
I'd like to move refusal because I don't think it doesn't matter to me what the inspector or the planning say. We're here because we represent the people of the Metropolitan Borough of Oldham. And if we think it isn't a good idea to move all these people in to these properties, creating the problems that the ward member detailed earlier on, then I think it's our duty to stand up and be heard, and at least we can say we did try on behalf to stop it. So I will move refusal.
Is that seconded? Sorry?
I want to concur with Councillor Hudson. I've sat on many committee meetings where HMOs have been brought up, and depending on which way the planning officers have decided their recommendations go, there's been varied arguments. There's been arguments that there's a shortage of family-sized homes being taken off the market and turned into HMOs, and they needed across the borough because there's large families waiting for them. There's also been arguments that there's not enough single-bedroom properties when they've recommended approval. So I'm going to second Councillor Hudson for refusal.
What we need now, it's been moved and seconded, is the reasons for refusal. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Hudson, we do need reasons for refusal.
The reasons are as stated by the ward councillor. Particularly in view of the girl next door.
I think that we have to have some clarity, because obviously we can't refuse something unless there's definitive planning reasons.
My understanding is we can do what we like. We're elected representatives, and I think we've been told often enough that what we can and can't do. And I think the public have rebelled against this. And the one instance was what we said about Europe. They had 4 years, all parties, to do something about it, and they didn't. So I'm saying to you, there's the highways, there's all sorts of things, and the intrusion on public life in the area. I don't think you can say that 8 to 10 people, individuals, that will have cars, those jobs that were said earlier, they'll all have cars and they'll all be there. And I think the ward councillor knows what's going on in his ward. And I really am shocked to find that we're not listening to the ward councillor, and I want it to be for the reasons he says. I don't believe we should support this.
Well, while I appreciate what you say is that obviously we're a semi-judicial body that really has to give reasons. If we do not give reasons, of course, that we really have to have reasons so our officers can defend them in any appeal that takes place. So I don't know what you pulling off what you are saying is you're talking about highways and loss of amenity to local residents.
Yes, like a off-road.
Okay, we'll take the refusal. We're talking to the mover and seconder now that have refused this. Has anybody got any comments? Councillor Akhtar wanted to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, if we go back to the parking issue, because the planning officer said there's space for two cars there, but the applicant said there's space for 4. But if we look at the garden, can we create more parking spaces in that front garden, or no? No.
Would you like to respond to that?
So I'll talk about highways in general. The parking configuration, as we can see there, isn't something that we would generally recommend if we were looking cold at an application for a driveway and light-duty vehicle crossing. We want vehicles to be able to drive on and drive off. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that there's additional parking if it can't be achieved safely at that location. I always say this for HMOs, the car ownership for HMO residents is expected to be low, and this is in a sustainable location. So there's no particular reason for me to expect there to be as high a car ownership level as people automatically think, that every room will have at least 1 car attached to it, and that probably won't be the case. If it is the case, it's the residents' own responsibility to make sure that they can park safely and legally nearby. That won't include pavement parking. It won't include obstruction of the bus stop. So when I've assessed the parking provision, the result of this development will be no worse than the nearby houses in terms of parking provision and the expected use by residents and their visitors.
Right, yeah, so.
You just raised a few more doubts in my head now. The way the driveway is there at the moment, you said you wouldn't recommend it if somebody applied for it now. Is that right, or?
If I'm talking purely in engineering terms...
No, if somebody, well, for example, in terms of that front garden,
yeah.
the way the cars are parked, if the owner applied to have a drop curb and have parking the way it is, would you recommend 2 parking spaces there or no?
I would recommend that that driveway is wide enough for 2 cars, but not parked particularly how they're parked, because if that was shown on a parking layout, and I do this all the time with the planning officers, I'll say, ask for the parking spaces to be reconfigured so it's in line with our light duty vehicle crossing policy. That driveway can accommodate vehicles in line with our policy, not as shown as parked on there. But then once they've got the crossings, we can't
then it's their choice.
How they park.
No, thank you for that clarification.
Right, is there any more contributions? Councillor Hume.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just have it clarified whether the reasons listed for rejection are planning considerations or not, or whether we'll need to use more technical language in terms of neighbouring residential amenity, future occupiers amenity, and the traffic issues, whether or not the ones listed by Councillor Hudson are indeed planning considerations that are defendable.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the reason why we referenced the Pole Lane appeal decision was that it was a fairly recent decision, and as was mentioned earlier, most of the issues that were raised in that particular instance were the ones that are being raised tonight, and particular ones in relation to character of the area and loss of family housing and so forth. Although each application obviously has to be determined on its own merits and circumstances are slightly different, the inspector specifically focused on those issues and said that if you are going to refuse an application on those grounds, there has to be strong evidence to justify that. And I don't believe that there is strong evidence to do that, otherwise clearly we would have presented that to the members. In terms of amenity issues, similarly, fear of crime, for instance, fear of antisocial behaviour, these are legitimate material considerations. But if applications are to be refused for that reason, they've got to be supported by evidence. And similarly, and this is always going to be difficult where the use doesn't exist at the present time, we don't believe there is evidence to justify that in this particular area. I think the fallback position, which includes the extension and the ability to build the extension and to follow a two-stage process, and then to use the property as a 6-bedroom HMO. Members have to be aware of that and they have to take that into consideration. So even though you might consider that the increase in activity may cause additional nuisance in the area, that has to be considered in the context of the fact that the property can be converted to 6 residents. So you might have strong views on that, and they may well be justified. But the fallback permitted development situation is also material, and if the application is refused, the inspector would obviously consider that issue as well. In terms of the traffic and parking issue, I think one of the points Wendy was trying to make is that it's fine to say you've got space within a site for vehicles to stand, but those vehicles have got to be able to manoeuvre within that site. They've got to manoeuvre safely in the context of coming off and to from the site. Again, the issue of the fact that it could be converted to 6 residents, opposed to 7, is relevant in that consideration. But of course, if you get different people within a household moving into a property, they live slightly different lives, the comings and goings might be slightly different. If you have a family, the family could move in there into this property and could have 4 cars, but clearly as a family they can work together more appropriately to operate that. So I feel it would be difficult to follow a refusal on those type of grounds, but it is difficult to get parking in this site. It is obviously a busy main road. There's not much in the way of alternative, safe and legal facilities in the locality. And that may be something members might want to consider a little bit further. But as I say, going back, I think the more issues of general amenity are difficult having regard to the fallback position of the planning regulations. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'm going to go towards the vote now. On the proposal before us. But before I do, I think we have to make it clear that we're talking, in this particular instance, about the addition of 1 unit, 1 person within this property. That's all, because this permitted development for, as has been stated, quite considerably for 6 residents and 6 rooms. And also, I think there's a clear recommendation from officers to approve this. And that's based not just on their observations and work they've done, but on previous applications that have been dealt with over the last year. So in doing that, I'll go to the vote now. You've got a proposal which has been seconded to refuse the application. All those in favour of refusal, please show. So I make that 6. All those against refusal. Well, the casting vote, I'll move that we approve the development. Thanks very much indeed. And sorry, we'll have to move to approval now. All those in favour of approval, please show. Sorry. Could I move approval?
I'll second.
All those in favour of approval? All those against? Thank you. It's 6-6, and I will move the casting vote to approve the development. Thank you. We're moving on now, and we're moving on to the second application on your sheet, which is Mayfield School.
Are you doing that next?
Yeah. There's a number of people here for Mayfield. Okay, if the officers can answer. Sorry?
It is cold in here. It is cold in
Yeah.
here. It is cold in here.
They had to have overcoats on, haven't we? Right, if we could get the application outlined by the officers.
Thank you, Chair. This second application involves various extensions and works to Mayfield Primary School, obviously on Mayfield Road. And we'll run through these on the photographs. So this is the site itself, roughly within this rectangle of land, but there are residential properties on the opposite side of Kingston Avenue here at the north end of the site, and there are some residential properties at the bottom end of the site. There are also some modern residential properties and some more traditional properties which face the site itself. In general, it is obviously a primarily residential area. So this is the site, the main site. The main buildings at the moment are situated towards the Mayfield Road frontage of the site. There is a car park that comes off at the opposite end of the site, a playing field in this area, and a hard standing in this part of the site. So we'll run through the various proposals to expand the school. So first is this Mayfield Road, and you can see the tree line nature of that road. The trees on this end will not be affected by the proposed development. You'll see the houses on the opposite side of the road and the relationship with the existing school buildings. This is to show you the first element, which is a hall extension, and this will effectively cover this particular gap between the existing buildings. It won't project nearer to Mayfield Road or to the houses opposite, and you will be seen in the context of those buildings. You'll see from the height as a modern appearance, but reflects the kind of vertical window openings of the existing building, and in scale is lower due to the lack of the hipped roof. The second element, and this is the most substantial part of this, and this is to create new classroom accommodation at this end of the site. This is the area itself, so the existing buildings, and the proposed two-storey building will be on part of the existing hard standing in this area. Again, as I say, the relationship with Mayfield Road, not affected by loss of any trees. This is to give you that view in a wider context. So looking from the houses across Mayfield Road, this is the hall that we were looking at previously, and this is effectively the gable wall of the larger classroom extension. That's the area that faces across the expanse of hard standing, so providing lots of lighting into those rooms, obviously dominated by the pitch roof features to give it some kind of architectural integrity. These are just giving other views of that, so that's looking perhaps further out on the angle of there, and then from the opposite direction. Next, we move round to the opposite end of the site. So this is where the existing playing field is, and this is to be converted into an all-weather pitch in that particular area. This is the Kingston Avenue site, which is currently a cul-de-sac, as you can see, with housing opposite. Now, on the original application, it was proposed to utilise a new access at the end of this for construction traffic. That's now been removed from the application, and access, a temporary access, will be formed away from this site. One impact on this street scene will be that the existing trees will be required to be removed in order to facilitate the introduction of the all-weather surface. We did look at whether there were methods of constructing that would retain the trees, but our arboriculturalist wasn't convinced that in the longer term it wouldn't cause damage to the roots of these trees and therefore cause problems in the future. So those trees will be removed as part of the application. This is the top end of Kingston Avenue, and a couple of reasons to show this one. This is the property at the far end of the site, and just beyond the gates on the hard standing, approximately up to this point, will be where the gable of the two-storey extension will come. Again, some of these trees will need to be removed. We have looked to retain this specimen, which was originally shown to be removed, for a couple of reasons, because now the construction access won't come through there, but also that it provides a degree of screening between the end house and the new accommodation in the school building. Move round. One of the main issues with this proposal is that this is a traditional school site. It's in an area that was obviously developed during the days when not everybody had a car and car usage was much lower. Therefore, the site does not have any real facility to accommodate additional parking. And that is important because, as you'll see in the report, effectively this extension to the school accommodation is to meet an identified demand for new accommodation for pupils in this area. So there's an increase, almost doubling of the number of pupils and of the number of staff that will be required. But clearly there's not the facility within the site to accommodate that. We have looked to increase some of the parking at this end of the site, and you may be able to make out that these are double spaces in there. Normally, of course, not workable, but for the school, these are intended for the staff who obviously will be working the same hours. So it's not a problem that somebody is actually blocking them in during that time. You'll notice that the highway officer has raised some concerns about that, but again, it recognises that this is an established site, and it has to be said from the report, although we've notified over 100 properties in the local area, unlike many other school sites, this hasn't been raised as being a particular problem in this instance. So that's the photograph of the car parking area. You'll see these existing layouts, so we're effectively doubling the parking spaces on this particular side. Some other areas, so that's again just giving you a close-up of the car park layout. Further extensions at the far end of the school building are being proposed as well, but they're much smaller and further away from neighbouring boundaries. So that's within this part of the site. There are some properties here, but again, the height of this accommodation, its relationship with the existing properties, means there are no problems. There was a concern by one of these residents about the red edge of the site intruding onto some land. That's now been corrected on the application form, on the submitted plans. So there's various proposals for this site. As you see in the report, an identified need, and the education department have raised some concerns that if this development wasn't to go ahead, it would cause problems in the future with meeting that demand. It's a site that's clearly located within its community. Many of the pupils are identified as living within a mile of this particular site, and in terms of compensation for loss of trees on the site, members will see in the report there is a requirement for a financial contribution to accommodate that. You'll notice on the late list there's a slight amendment to the wording of that, and the reason for that is that there's two ways this could be achieved. Normally, if this was an external private developer, they'd enter into a legal agreement with the council. Clearly, this is a scheme being funded through the education department, and there may well be a separate means internally of that money being provided for the replacement tree planting. So it's been slightly amended. It may not need the legal agreement, but the objective is that if members support this proposal, we're looking for a resolution to grant and for that decision to be issued once either a legal agreement is signed or the finance has been secured for that replacement planting. On that basis, and obviously unless members have any questions later, it's recommended for approval.
Has anybody got any questions at this stage? Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, so at recent council meetings we declared a climate emergency, and we've also committed that we will be planting a net increase of trees in this borough. So I suppose the question is, how many trees are going to be lost and how many trees will be planted, and what guarantees can we have of that actually occurs? Because it doesn't make it quite clear in this or even in the late list. I know you say there'll be some money set aside, but that doesn't really clarify whether we're going to have a net increase of trees, how many trees have been lost, and also what protection status those trees had, which will be lost as well.
First of all, the trees don't have any formal protection. Now, that's not unusual because the site is owned by the council. So the assumption is that the council will use its best means and not remove trees unnecessarily. So it's not unusual that there is no tree preservation order, but that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean the trees don't have great value on the site. My understanding is there's approximately 40 trees that will be lost, but one of the points that has been made by the applicant is that a significant number of those are young saplings that have been planted more recently. So the more concern is about the mature trees that you saw earlier on around the Kingston Avenue area being lost within the site. The council's policy for replacement on trees is that it's done on a 3-to-1 basis. So the calculation that's been put forward for the £13,050 has been done on the basis of that replacement planting scheme. Clearly, if that money is provided, the obligation there is that that money is spent for that specific purpose in the nearby park. So there are controls in that agreement as to where those trees are planted.
Councillor Hume.
My question got asked. That was literally what, I was going to ask that, so that's fine. Yeah, so everything's been clarified. Thanks.
Got questions at this stage? If not, could I ask, is it Ms Howitt to speak on behalf of the developer?
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Paul Howitt from Halliday Meacham Architects, and I'm acting as agent on behalf of the client, who in this case is the Cranmer Trust, who sit above the school. The Cranmer Trust strongly believes that the investment in the school is a significant financial investment by Oldham Council into the local community, which the Trust warmly welcomes and supports. The Trust believes that this investment will help build on Mayfield Primary School's improving education performance and directly benefit the children within the immediate locality, and therefore, by extension, benefit the local community. To invest in Mayfield Primary School will require building works. The school is set in the heart of the local community and therefore surrounded by the residential public access roads that the school serves. Access to the site inevitably must be via these public roads. However, we believe that through this planning process and the conditions set on the appointed contractor, disruption will be kept to a minimum and for the shortest time possible. The Trust has been in touch with the community from the start of the development. Leaflet drops and open evening, and now that the programme and plans are being finalised, a leaflet that answers their concerns has been sent to nearby residents. The Trust is part of the community and are listening to the community and will continue to do so as work proceeds. We shall involve the community in the development, giving notice when disruption is likely and keeping them up to date with progress. All discussions with potential contractors have considered the residential setting and the concerns of residents, which have been incorporated into the programme for the development and the plans for the school. The potential contractors have been chosen for their skill in such developments and will be closely monitored by the design team and the Trust. The construction will be disruptive but kept to a minimum in both duration and timing of work in the day to reduce noise, traffic and dust as far as possible. The contractor has committed to informing nearby residents with letter drops and a contact number for liaison or the raising of concerns. We understand that there are concerns that the expansion of the school may result in increased traffic and parking issues. However, for children who attend the school, they live very close. We're looking to extend the school's travel plan post-construction for cycling and walking to school opportunities. We've also moved the construction access during the construction works to the multi-use games area. And hopefully we've addressed the concerns where we've seen them. For the trees, we do note that the saplings were on designated playing field, so had to be removed and they shouldn't have been planted in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah, you got away very easily there.
I can speak for ages.
Well, we know. So can a lot of people, unfortunately. Thanks very much, Mr. Abbott. Councillor Ball.
Right, thank you. The 3 local ward councillors for St James's are fully supportive of this application. We know that with even more new homes being built in Durka, we have to have more school places. We did, however, have some concerns at the beginning, but they've been addressed. The entry to the site by the wagons using Kingston Avenue will not now happen, and we had real concerns about that. Also, as an email that was sent to me today, the height of the fence around the Mugger pitch has been raised to 1.8 metres. And as long as that is the fence that is facing Kingston and Waverley Street, then that's great, because we've got to stop the balls from going into the houses and into the road. We also want to make sure that there will be no floodlights at all, ever, installed around the Mugger. It is far too close to homes, and there's a floodlit pitch that the kids can use in Stoneleigh Park. Hopefully, if the transport system becomes run by the Greater Manchester Authority, then improvement to the bus service could be looked at, as part of the previous Durka service has recently been removed, and more buses will be needed to bring the children in. With regard to the extra trees, we love trees, and we would like to work with the school in planting these in the park. There is, you can contact the Woodland Trust, and you get, Angela will shout at me because I can't remember the name of them, you get little ones, hundreds free, what they call whips. So if the school wants to take that on board, and then the planting of the trees will not just take place now, but over the next few years as those grow. However, we do have one real concern, and that there has to be public consultation on the traffic calming that's being proposed. And we want this public consultation to be held in the school, so all the residents that use the school and the area can take part.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Has anybody got any questions? My understanding, traffic calming would actually have to be consulted on anyway. You know, it's highway improvements. Yeah, yeah. But I'm sure officers will take note of your concerns, yeah. Are we all okay? Thanks very much indeed. Right, it's open for discussion. Certainly.
Yeah, just a quick, there was a mention about preliminary bat inspection was recommended. I'm just wondering if that's been taking place or whether that still needs to be done.
It's been clarified. There was one building on the site that had some potential for roosts within its roof space, but it's been confirmed that that building is not going to be affected by the proposed building works.
Any further comments? Could I move approval? Are we all in favour? Thank you, that's approved. If we could move on to the we'll go into the agenda now and take it in order, which is always good. And the first application is Hadfield Works, Hadfield Street. Right, we'll hear the officers on this.
Thank you, Chair. The application before you is for outline consent for the redevelopment of Hadfield Works. It includes the demolition of the buildings. Indicative plans have been provided showing up to 19 dwellings. Access is to be considered and all of the matters are reserved. Location plan here shows Hadfield Street and the buildings that are to be removed. There's a further plan there showing the whole site area in green, and this is the indicative layout. As you can see from the previous slides, the site was previously used for employment. However, a viability assessment has been provided as part of the application saying that it is no longer viable for employment use. This relates mainly to the condition of the buildings. You can see from the photos here the condition of the buildings. I'll go back, sorry, I've gone a bit quick there. The condition of the buildings on site, these are taken from inside the site. And this is obviously Hadfield Street and the adjacent residential properties. And further on, this is the site, and this is the corner with Ashton Road. In relation to the consideration, when considering housing now, given that the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, the NPPF states that we must consider the utility balance, where grant permission where significant and demonstrable harm can't be shown to outweigh the benefits. In considering the benefits and obviously the negatives, there is a loss of employment, and the officer has considered the loss of that employment to be limited given the site area and the condition of the buildings on site. Considering the benefits, obviously you've all heard on previous housing applications the benefits of housing in terms of economic, social and environmental benefits. It's quite clear that the reuse of this site will bring an environmental benefit. As part of the consideration, due to the viability of the site and the issues that it holds, there is an agreement for a Section 106 to be made following the recommendation of the committee. This will include £5,000 for a traffic order in relation to waiting restrictions at the access, obviously because its location close to Ashton Road, and there is a £30,000 in relation to open space. It's noted following contact with colleagues that this could be spent in Copsdale Park, improving the provision there, which is very local. It's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got any questions at this stage? No. If I could, Mr. Pogson, who speaks on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Dodgson from Cardinal Chartered Surveyors. We are the applicant's agent. This is an application that does have case officer recommendation for approval. There are no statutory consultee objections or no objections from the general public. I therefore see that there's no benefit really in repeating what the planning officer has just presented to you. So my attendance tonight really is just to take any questions from the committee members. Thank you.
Excellent. Has anybody got any questions at all? No? Right. Second. Are we all in favour of approval? Thank you very much indeed. The next item is.
We're going to go for the one that's got another speaker.
Yeah, we can do. If we just duck North Chaddeston for the present because there's no speakers, and move on to the Lancaster Club. If you could outline the application.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for full planning approval for the erection of 12 dwellings at a part of the Lancaster Club. As you can see here from the area edged red, it is directly adjacent to the existing site that is under construction and adjacent to the listed building, which is here. The proposal is for 12 dwellings. They have both front and rear gardens and provide 2 car parking spaces each. There is an amendment to the during the scheme for highway reasons to provide this roundabout from part of the access. Here's the proposed house types for you all to see. And this is the site from an aerial off Google showing it in its reasonably current state. As part of the development of the Lancaster Club site, it's been used for the storage of materials and the comings and goings of vehicles quite clearly. And then this is the artist's impression. Again, the tilted balance applies in terms of housing. It's directly adjacent to a current housing site. It provides additional housings and the benefits that it has. And there are no objections from any consultees. And in relation to the provision of open space, which is the only requirement of it, there's an agreed £60,000 contribution towards open space, and that is to the Moston Brook Open Space Enhancement. In terms of the impact on the listed building, that has been considered because it's adjacent. It doesn't affect its setting. And as such, it doesn't cause any harm, it's neutral. You'll note on the late list that renewable energy condition has been attached in addition to address that matter as well. It's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. There's 106 monies going to the Moston Brook scheme, which covers Oldham and Manchester. So can we just confirm that those funds are kept within the Oldham side of the scheme? Can we make sure that that happens?
The funding we use by our own parks department to carry out those works, and clearly they don't have authority to go over the border and go carrying out those works. So realistically, yes, it would have to be done within this particular borough. Thank you.
Are there any further questions at this stage? If not, Mr. Shipman.
Good evening, Chairman and Committee. My name is Matthew Shipman and I'm the Planning Manager at Belware Homes and Manchester Division, who are the applicants for this application. As you're aware, this application is applying for an extension to the existing Belware development currently under construction at the former Lancaster Club, known as Lancaster Gardens. Belware have been very successful in working with the local authority to provide much-needed family housing for local people on the existing site and elsewhere in Oldham. And this represents an opportunity to provide more homes within this area on a vacant, previously developed site. As part of the application, Belware have undertaken considerable technical work which has demonstrated that there are no physical or policy constraints to this development being approved today. This includes relevant highway works, which have concluded that the existing Lodge Hall Drive highway providing access to the existing site off Broadway can accommodate the additional 12 dwellings. Notwithstanding this, Belware have agreed to provide a mini roundabout on Lodge Hall Drive to further improve safety and accessibility following engagement with the Council's highway officer. In terms of the scheme put before you, the dwellings, internal road layout and the landscaping has been designed so as to be in keeping with those currently occupied or under construction on the existing site. This enables the additional development to appear in keeping with the existing site and not distract from the visual amenities experienced along the stretch of Broadway, or the setting of Fellswade Lodge, which is obviously a listed building and sits within the existing site. I can confirm that all proposed dwellings will meet the minimum space standards set by latest government guidance. Subject to the Committee's decision today, Belware will enter into a legal agreement with the Council to safeguard an off-site contribution of circa £60,000 made by the company for enhancement works to Moss and Brook Green Corridor, which lies to the west of the site. This was agreed by officers as opposed to an on-site contribution given the scale of the site and the provision of open space already provided as part of the existing site. Belware have also agreed as part of the existing highway agreement to carry out works to insert the central reservation and block up the existing vehicle access into the site. There are no other planning obligations required by policy given the scale of this scheme. As is evident, the scheme is fully compliant with local and national planning policy, has no statutory consultee objections, and there are no adverse planning factors that outweigh the positive benefits of this scheme. I therefore kindly ask that members can resolve to approve this development to enable Belware to continue delivering much needed high quality family housing in Failsworth. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and I'm happy to take any questions from the panel. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Hume?
So I've noticed in the site that there's some nice south-facing roofs. Have you considered any solar panels to go with the housing?
No, the short answer to that is no, there is no provision for solar panels as part of this development. However, Belware will meet the Policy 18 requirements of the local plan. So the Policy 18 requires us to make energy saving, energy reductions above and beyond building regulations. So our dwellings will be able to comply with that policy in terms of how they're constructed to enable energy savings for the occupiers.
No further questions? Thanks very much, Mr. Chip. Has anybody got any comments? Could I move approval? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. The next item is, we're going back now to North Chadderton School. We have no speakers on this matter. If we asked, I'm sure the officers will do a quick run through first.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to the Mayfield application, there are a number of developments being proposed on the existing established school site. You can see these indicated in red, and we'll just quickly go through them on there. This is the proposed changing room facility, which goes with the existing all-weather facility on the site. There's an extension to the school and the library, within the existing building, and a proposal to extend car parking at the opposite end of the site. So again, this is the area where the changing facilities will go. You can just see the floodlights of the all-weather pitch on there. These are just the details of that changing facility, what it will look like. Then move further into the site itself. So this is the area for the 3-storey science blocks, well within the school grounds. And again, just give you the details of that, the classrooms on each level, and the style and design scale of that building. Next on to the extension to the library, which again, similar style to the existing buildings, giving you an indication of the layout of that. And then down to the car parking extension at the bottom end of the site. So there's existing access that comes through. As you can see, there's an area of grass in this area of the site. So it's proposed to reconfigure that particular area to increase the parking provision within the site itself. So essentially these various proposals, I won't reiterate what's in the report. Clearly if members have got any questions, I'll be glad to take those. Otherwise the application recommended for approval as shown in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hume.
Thanks, Chair. So just in terms of the representation in regards to the illegal parking, I'm just wondering whether there's anything we can do about that in maybe asking the school to remind the parents not to do those kind of things. Just, yeah, and the idling and things like that.
Can I say, Councillor Hume, we are well aware of the park, but not only in North Chad, but there's a primary school and a nursery across the road, and it's an absolute nightmare. And we have worked very hard and achieved absolutely nothing.
You'll see this as a science block, and there's no intention to actually increase the population of the school, as far as I'm aware. So, could I move approval?
Second.
All those in favour? Thanks very much indeed. The next one is Oldham College. Again, quite a substantial application. It's education night, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So this time, obviously, improvements for slightly older children. So obviously, everybody will know the college. It's just over. I always lose direction here. It's over that direction, one of these directions, out of the building. No, we're Rochdale Road. It's over there. Yes. The proposal, as you see, I mean, you might be able to see out of the window. At the moment, this is Rochdale Road running down the side of the site. You'll know all the buildings around the area. There's existing car park facility. So again, as you know, this drops down from the level of the road. The proposal essentially is to construct a new building which will be specifically for as a construction centre to broaden and increase the amount of facilities for training in the site. Obviously with the loss of car parking, there is proposal then at the rear of the site to introduce some new car parking facilities on there. One of the issues was the loss of some trees on the site, and again, similarly, there will be replacement planting on site in accordance with the council policy. So again, this is just showing from the road. So this is the area of the site itself. These are within the site, again showing the relationship to existing buildings. This is the structure, and it reflects the kind of modernistic style of the more recent buildings on the site. Again, just giving you can see that the layout internally. So again, this is a proposal primarily for that area, new parking spaces and compensation for replacement planting. Again, as you see from the report, recommended for approval. Again, any questions, please to answer. Thank you.
Councillor Hume.
Sorry, Chair. It's just in regards to the trees. I know you said that the policy is that we try and have a 3-to-1 replacement. It's at a 2-to-1 in this. I was just wondering if we could add a condition to make sure that it's 45 new trees that are planted instead of 30.
we can do whatever members want us to do, but there have been discussions between the applicant and our trees officer who's looked at the trees, and he's looked at those in the context of the specimens that be removed and obviously what will be replaced on the site itself. So he's made that judgment. I'm happy to run with that judgment, but clearly it's for members to either accept or we can go back and look at that particular issue. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to formally move that, or would you like to get the goodwill of the officers?
I'll move that. So is that adding that as a condition, or I don't want to
amend the condition?
Amend the condition. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I'll second it.
There's a relevant condition which is shown on the late list, which is condition 4, and you'll notice there that relates to tree planting. So yes, we can amend the relevant conditions to deal with that issue and then ask them to reconsider the tree planting issues. Thank you, Chair.
Are you happy with that? Okay. Has anybody else got any comments? If not, I'll move the application. All those in favour? Thank you. And the last application is an employee application, which is Chatterton Park Road.
As the Chair has said, this application is before you due to it being an employee of the Council. It's for single-storey side and rear extension. The application site, 140 Shannon Park Road, is set at an angle and is a two-storey dwelling of its own architectural quality and merit. As you can see here from the photos, the property does have significant merit in terms of its architecture, and that's the rear, and this is the neighbouring property, and this is what we will replace. Obviously there's existing significant greenhouses and outbuildings in terms of sheds and things. The applicant has looked at the design of the host dwelling and looked to put an extension on it that wouldn't detract from it, and try to retain the features in terms of the end gable in their entirety, and they will be seen. And due to the angle of it, obviously this image at the bottom left is quite difficult to look at, given that it's 2D, and obviously it needs to be 3D because it's at an angle if you look at the top here. But obviously from the public domain you will see the original features on the end. It is considered that it's an appropriate addition to the property, and it addresses issues in terms of design and amenity, and is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Has anybody got any questions? No? Are you sure, Councillor? Right. I will move approval.
I'll second it.
Everybody in favour? Thank you. If we could go on to the items of appeal that are there to note. 2 items. I don't know whether you've got any comments. No? Okay. I've moved that we receive them. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And that's the end of the meeting. Thanks very much indeed.
Very much, Chair.